Hi everyone, welcome to Climate Astrologer Witness. Again, I haven't been making very many videos because I'm really new at this and I'm kind of nervous. Hi, that's my kitty Chico. We have two more kitties. We would have only had one, getting it as a present for my younger daughter. Um, she's the little calico white mix. She looks more like a bobcat. I call her Bobcat now. Finally gave her a real name. And our other cat, Groot, my daughter, needed us to take two of her cats because she was moving, of course. So anyway, there's Chico. And he's standing by my rearing horse statue that I got many years ago in Louisiana when I went there with my husband. And so anyway, here I am, back again. And today what I'm trying to do is introduce two other astrologers. Remember, folks that may come here, this channel is mainly for astrologers, okay? Now, I am introducing the climate change topic in order to assist those astrologers who have not delved into that yet to come to an understanding about climate change and how to incorporate that and to what degree in their readings when they're doing this for people. Because as I've said on the other videos, you can't sit there and say, oh, your progressed Jupiter is going through your 10th house. So, for the next however many years, it finally hit your MC now, and you are going to have this wonderful life. No. I mean, generally speaking, I know astrologers don't necessarily say those things, but that's kind of the influence that we discuss many times. Or that's how it's presented in a way. Especially younger people that are just getting into astrology, and you're still using the cookbooks, so to speak, which is a great learning tool to begin with. But now, I don't want to get too far into all this introductory stuff. I want to get right down to the nitty gritty. So I just found an article that I really, really like on Pluto and Capricorn. And it describes the Pluto and Capricorn really well, talking about the 1500s and how that's one of the, I guess, most documented or discussed beginnings of Pluto transiting Capricorn that astrologers use. So in other words, they're talking about how the Reformation changed the world view, how it changed the paradigm. The church religion was so influential in society and culture, and then even in the human psyche, in every individual's lives. The church was everything. And at that point, Pluto through Capricorn just ripped through the institutions, the structure of the church, and brought down the hierarchies that were there. But then also, anytime you see a planet going through a sign, there's always the positives and negatives. So at the same time, it was trying to change things. The negative of Pluto, that iron fist of Pluto, was still there working and trying to keep power, which it did. It was just old new boss, same as the old boss. And that's many times how things work out. Sorry, kitty. You can't be up here right now, okay, sweetie? So, okay, let me get to this article. I'm not getting there very quick, am I? Here we go. I'm going to get better at this, I promise. So, this article was done by somebody that I've never run across before as an astrologer. let me see. It's from wisdommagazine.com. It's an article by Elizabeth Joyce. Okay. First, she talks about when Pluto first entered Capricorn in 2008. Therefore, then she moves on down to Pluto transited through Capricorn from December 24th, 1515 through the end of 1532. This was a time for the mass consciousness to renew the relationship with the divine. Okay. Religious transformation. These years saw the dawning of the Protestant Revolution, 1517, in Western Europe. This was a very important phase for a large portion of humanity. Although this Reformation was essentially a religious movement, it had massive impact on the human mind and consequently on human activities. Now, the next time Pluto went through Capricorn, she talks about the last ingress, not counting what we're in already, January 1762 until the spring of 1777. This was a time mankind reviewed its attitudes towards work, health, wealth, and the management of our natural resources, and that's a biggie right there. That's, when you're talking about climate change, management of resources. Let me state at the beginning of this whole thing, when I'm talking about climate change, I'm not talking about the ideas of what we're going to do about it. It's a little late for that, folks. That's what I'm trying to say here. Let me just go on this for a minute. This climate change has been known about from the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. I probably touched on that in the other videos. So therefore, please keep in mind, while you're learning about this, it was always known that burning fossil fuels was going to change the climate. Again, in the beginning decades, well, even in the beginning decades of the 20th century, we'll say, it still was known, but not necessarily really grasped that it was going to change the climate that fast, because in the 1850s, when those scientists realized what it could do, they realized, or they thought that it would take 1,000 years or more for it to really have an effect. But as time went on and the 1950s came around, we really saw that we had to do something about knowing more about this and the changes it could bring, because things were happening. And the amounts of CO2 they knew had to be growing, because the world economy now was becoming much, much larger. In other words, it was growing on an exponential scale. And that's another word to keep in mind, exponential. The problem with the human mind, it's being said, is that we do not really grasp the concept of exponential growth the way we need to, because that is part of what we're experiencing to the negative on this planet. Our population, our use of resources, everything, and the amount of destruction that we're doing, it's all on an exponential level. And as long as we're not understanding that and ignoring it, nothing's going to fix it. 1 second. I need to take my coffee. Yep, I'm drinking coffee. You see, this is another thing. So when I'm talking about understanding climate change, I'm not just talking about what we can do in general. I'm talking about inner behaviors and assumptions that humans make. We drink coffee. I love coffee. We ship it from all over the world, mainly South America and Middle East, I guess, on diesel ships. Should I even be drinking coffee? I even ask myself this. Well, let me put it this way. I became a vegetarian. Generally speaking, later it was more of a pescatarian, back in 1977. I won't go into details about how or why, whatever, right now. But so, therefore, my footprint in that respect has been really small. I only had 2 children, although even now we realize that probably, anyways, so we won't go there. But then also, I'm really not much of a consumer. Everything you see here in this picture, my clothes, jewelry, it's all secondhand. The TV's not. My husband bought that. But yeah. So yeah, he's not necessarily the same kind of thinker I am, although to a degree he is, because we just don't have a lot of money. But so everything is secondhand. I buy and have bought my clothes secondhand for decades. And there was a period in the 80s, my husband was like, oh yeah, and he started buying me more clothes that are new. But generally, almost my whole life, as an adult, I've been using secondhand clothes, and somewhat when I was young. So even the furniture, secondhand. I don't buy things. When you think about furniture, you're talking about buying something where we cut the logs here from our forest, send it on a diesel ship to China, and they make the furniture and they send it back on a diesel ship. I mean, really, so the change that needs to happen isn't one thing out there, one thing out here. It is within us and what we expect out of our lives. Okay? So if you're talking about a person's chart, I know it's going to be difficult to bring in to the person who's probably never looked into climate change or who doesn't hear about it much or thinks it's not real. You're not really going to be able to sit there and like be some kind of an activist. But what you might want to or be able to do is find a way to introduce new kinds of thinking to that person about what the assumptions of their life should be. It might not be easy with everyone, but if you, as the astrologer, start learning more about climate change and changing your own life, you might be able to come up with the reality of what to do and what to say to your clients. When you're talking about the generational planets, Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus, those are very good clues in a person's chart as to just how tuned in a person could be to this sort of thing. So, of course, if it's conjunct or strongly aspecting a natal planet or on their angles, that is a key to help them with that energy, because they're keyed in anyway, but they might not know where the door is. So if you can key them into climate change lightly or from a backdoor kind of way where they're not, people have a tendency to think this is political. It's not political. It's scientific. Now, again, do you have to bring up even the word climate change? Not necessarily. But when I'm talking about developing a way to help people realize that the world is changing, the way we have to be is changing, and that it's better for them to change ahead of time or along with, at least, that their lives will go much smoother rather than to fight that energy that's already strong within their chart. So, now, myself, Pluto had been going through my second house. First, it was in my first house, finishing up the Capricorn. I have Sagittarius rising. My second house starts at 17 Capricorn, and my Venus is right there. So that really influenced and had already been influencing my concepts of the material world, my own resources and my own values. it was really hard at first because I would go to the store to get groceries and I would see certain things, not just food, but other stores, and I'd be upset. Even though I always bought my clothes secondhand, still there'd be something, or some kind of jewelry or some kind of clothing, and I actually felt within me a little bit of like negativity or jealousy that I didn't have the money to purchase those things. But I got over that because I was also very aware that by purchasing those things, I was creating demand. When you create demand, the manufacturers, the industrialists, just keep pumping the stuff out. So let me give you a really good way to think about this. Okay, so the oceans are really, really full of plastic. And I think I mentioned on other videos that plastic never goes away. It breaks down to its molecules and makes a soup, okay? So even the little pieces, like there's videos of mama birds feeding their babies plastic, and you've seen pictures or videos of birds where their stomachs have been opened and there's plastic in there to kill them, or whales, or anything along these lines. So who here has children or know small children who they might get Christmas presents for this year and will end up giving them some kind of plastic toy? Like, this is what I'm talking about. We have to find ways to change within ourselves, understanding that the paradigm is shifting. Human beings cannot assume we are superior because we're not. We're killing our planet. We are not superior to the rest of the natural world. So, my thoughts, I'm in a couple of Facebook pages for climate change, and I think what I'm going to do is introduce this idea. Why don't we start a movement that this Christmas, there's no plastic toys, no plastic objects being bought by those that are aware? Nothing. We really shouldn't be buying much of anything for Christmas, but I mean, you could always do things like purchase a service for someone, as long as that can also be CO2 producing, or you can do something yourself for someone. Clean a closet, or run groceries for them if they're older, or anything along those lines. A week's worth of dusting and cleaning for somebody that's older or ill, any kind of thing like that. Or make something out of things around your own house. If you've needed to purge and you have old stuff, I know that sometimes people, oh, you're giving me some leftover thing, but if you make something more out of it, that's not so terrible either. And sometimes I guess you might end up buying a little paint or something, and that's not so great either. But it's a beginning. We could start by doing these things, changing how we think, and then applying that to what we do. You cannot just academically try to understand this. It has to come out in what we actually do and how we live. So my proposal is that this Christmas we buy no little plastic toys for kids. I have a grandson who's only 3. He'll be almost 4 by Christmas. Also, schools. I work in schools. I'm a substitute teacher, and right now I'm not really doing much of that since the virus has started. But they have a lot of manipulatives, especially for math and things like that. The little plastic cubes. Yeah, I know. It was a good idea, so to speak. I mean, think about thousands of years ago when they first came up with the abacus. That was like little, wooden beads on the scale type thing, and they really worked their math on that. It was almost like a calculator. I mean, there's people that can really work those things. And but so yeah, manipulatives are really good to help a kid understand, but there's other things you could use. We don't need to manufacture all this plastic because people say recycle. Only 15% of what gets sent to be recycled gets recycled. The companies will cheat. The companies will do anything they can not to go through the processes that they need to go through. And at the same time, you're still using energy and creating CO2 to do the recycling. What we're trying to do is get away from the CO2 production. Keep that in mind. So if they're not manufacturing the plastic in the first place, then they don't have to recycle it and they don't have to produce CO2 again to recycle it. Please get this process, this whole chain of events down. Manufacturing these things in the first place is part of the problem, and then reusing them and remanufacturing them over into something else just continues that process. So, people are somewhat concerned and somewhat knowledgeable on climate change these days, but there's a much deeper level that people are not getting to. Pluto in Capricorn, changing the functions by which civilization, or excuse me, Pluto in Capricorn, changing the institutions and the functions by which society works. So we have to really start to not just talk platitudes, oh, humanity has to have a consciousness awakening, oh, if we all are working together in this, we're all one, even with the whole racial idea, racial inequalities and the conflicts having to do with that, the institutional racism. People talk about these things, and that's the beginning. But if you're not practicing it, we're not going anywhere. To get people all across the world to understand climate change is a really difficult thing. Granted, there's many people who produce almost no CO2, indigenous families in, huts. I mean, really. The whole idea of providing, little ovens to them for them so they don't have to cut down trees. Okay, fine. First of all, you're producing CO2 by making the damn oven. Second of all, why are you worried about them and you're not worried about all the crap that we make and cut down trees for to sit our butts on? Really? I mean, we just don't have our heads on straight at all. It's nice that maybe there's these solar ovens that people don't have to cut a tree down, but let's stop our own shit first. Sorry. That's the reality. I mean, I'm here today to get down to brass tacks. I'm tired of everything. We've had, what is it, 22, 23, 24? I don't know. I've lost count now. Climate change symposiums, whatever they call it, conferences, and nothing has changed. We are continuously raising our CO2 production. 2018 or 2019 was we used the most fossil fuel that we've ever used. So don't be delusional about the whole green movement with the renewables. No, you have to use fossil fuels to make them in the first place. You have to have extremely high temperatures to make the steel for windmills. You have to have, and then you can only do that with coal. I mean, really, this is just a way to keep our industrial capitalist society going. Now you think I'm making it political by talking about capitalism, but you have to understand if there's an economic system that's based on profit, that's not going to help anything. Any company or any individual is going to do whatever they can do to make their profit and to make as much profit as possible. So they're never going to do what's absolutely necessary in order to fix climate change. The only thing at this point, if by miracle, is degrowth, which is extremely limiting the growth of our economies around the world. The whole world economy would have to start reducing growth, GDP. We cannot expect to keep living at the same levels that we have been. If any astrologer here who's listening, please think about this and start reading about climate change feedback loops, ocean acidification. What is a blue ocean event? Reading about the East Siberian Sea shelf and the methane hydrates under there. Some climate scientists to look up would be Peter Wadhams. He's a glaciologist. Kevin Anderson is good. I mean, he still kind of is pushing the renewables, but not in the same way most people do. I mean, if we want to go down the renewable route, if you want to have electricity for water treatment, if you want to have electricity for hospitals, okay, make some renewables. But please don't make enough renewables to keep casinos going and stadiums for sports. If you look up how much CO2 is produced by airplanes, 1,500 private jets going to a football game? Really? That's how many private jets went to the last football game. So I'm really, really, really happy about how COVID-19 has completely put a almost complete shutdown on professional sports. And don't think, though, that this slowdown of our economies because of COVID has made much of a dent in CO2 production. It was almost 17% up until recently, but that's not the whole year. That was about a month ago I read that statistic. But that's not going to be the whole year. I mean, at different parts, we're already ramping back up again. But in order for any dent to occur in our overall emissions and the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere, would take decades of that sort of thing. Do you understand what I'm saying? So, Pluto through Capricorn, the negatives are going along with the positives. And I don't see much in the way of positives. Whatever positives are happening are being forced on us, like reducing our economies at least this year because of COVID. It's being forced on us. To change our institutions and our organizations, it's being forced on us through COVID. And also, look at the racial injustice that's been happening. It's being forced because it was never done properly. You would have police forces with cops who continuously push boundaries or push the limits of what they could do. And it was never corrected. They were never taken out until they did the ultimate. And even then, many times, decades past, they didn't have any consequences. So when you get to a point, a peak, something has to give. And this is now. But at the same time, some of these pushes and revolutions are trying to happen. The hammer, the iron fist of the powers that be are pushing back hard. And you can see that in our lives today with the people at the top, particular people at the top, trying to hold on to power. And Pluto will do that using any means necessary, especially in Capricorn. So be ready. Do as much reading about these things as possible. I almost bought it. I read snippets of it. A book by Jane Mayer, Meyer, on dark money. That'll teach you all about billionaires and how they manipulate the economies to make their monies. There's many books. The key to keep in mind is if something's telling you that you can be, your life can be smooth and economically stable and you can have growth and you can have, things, everything you wanted, don't listen. Paring down that kind of an idea is a Capricorn idea. Capricorn is very efficient and very minimalist in the positive sense. deprivation. Capricorns are very aware of that, but don't look at it as that. What we're doing is learning how to live within our means on the planet. So it's not just about your own income, it's about the income that we have on this planet. We must learn to live within that means. And it's really, really drastically different than what you could ever imagine. People living in huts, that's the key right there. Do we need to go back? Well, we got our houses already, so you may as well, keep it, whatever. But if you're somebody who's well off and you have a big house, why are you the only one living in it? I mean, seriously. So, I don't know. I'm just throwing ideas out there. If you are finding this very difficult to grasp, which it really can be difficult, you need to learn about it. The reason you're finding it difficult is because you're not understanding. Me being a Sagittarius, Sagittarius rising, moon. Yeah, I am a Scorpio. But with all that Sagittarius, my key about almost any concept is that I need to understand it. So that is the beginning. Now, I should wrap this up. I don't know. I didn't really get across a lot of what I wanted to get across, I don't think. But I might make another video tomorrow. But as Pluto finishes up in Capricorn, cleans up, destroys, powers down, it's going to be a lot of both. When it moves into Aquarius, one of the things I was thinking of was that's when we might be able to see humanity, the sign of Aquarius, transform, okay, in the way that we need to. But the problem is, it's not going to be enough people. Not enough people get it. Or they only think it has to be tweaked. It has to be this deep. You think of Pluto. We know what that means. We know what Pluto means. It means almost throwing the baby out with the bathwater, and pretty much that's what we have to do. I know they keep saying in some, astrology books, oh, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. This time it's pretty almost like that. Because almost everything about our whole concept of living is wrong. Can we go back to subsistence farming and hunter-gatherer? Not really. I mean, I think that's how we should have stayed living, the way we lived thousands and thousands of years ago. But now with 8 billion people, people would starve to death. I mean, with the complex infrastructure for getting food to people and water, yeah, no, it's not going to work. But people are going to be dying anyway. But what needs to be done is to understand the new forms of living, pare down drastically, and those ideas to help people live need to be implemented. Will they be? No, I'm not holding my breath. I'm really not. I mean, do you think the powers that be are going to help by giving up their wealth and their power to help all the little people around the world get food and water? At 3 degrees Celsius hotter than temperatures before the Industrial Revolution, you cannot grow grains to scale. So, in that case, food shortages, they're going to be starting not too distant, and not in the too distant future. I mean, when you're reading something for somebody, there's going to be plenty of people who aren't going to be able to handle this news. They're not going to want to hear it. So, of course, you're not really going to say these things unless you know for a fact that you can talk to somebody who is ready for that. But, again, try to help your clients look out into the world and see what's going on with the economy and little things that you can throw in there. Like, hey, our economy is really based on our ecology. You're not going to have an economy of money without an ecology to get resources. if you don't have topsoil that's healthy and alive with living microorganisms in it, you're not going to get food. The only reason we have so much food coming out of our own breadbasket in the United States is because we pile on fertilizer to a massive acres in the Midwest, and that fertilizer is made from natural gas. Natural gas is having trouble in this day and age already, the fracking, etc., because it's not economical to be produced, because those wells don't last very long. If you look up there's a really good site called resilience.org. Okay, they have a lot of information on there about energy. They have a whole energy section. Start reading about that. And then you see how I went from food to soil to energy. See, everything is connected. You start to understand that. One piece of the chain falls apart, another piece falls apart. And that's the same thing in our ecosystems. They have such a thing called co-extinctions. If an animal eats a particular other animal, the animal he eats goes extinct. What's going to happen to that other animal? It's going to go extinct. And that keeps happening. Look up information on the Sixth Mass Extinction. Biodiversity loss. This is part of, and as big or bigger than climate change. Everything's being lost because of climate change, but also because of human encroaching into our ecosystems to cut down trees, to rip up forests, to rip up land masses for mining, extractive industries. Just look up extractive industry. I mean, they do that for everything. Right now, I remember just reading the last couple of weeks, in Finland, I believe it was, there was an energy company that wanted to go, or an extractive mining company, I should say, to go in and get cobalt. And these acres and acres of land that Newfoundlanders use to graze their reindeer. And that's their living. That's how they live, is on reindeer, with reindeer. And this company wanted to go in, and they're fighting tooth and nail to keep this cobalt company out. They're going to rip up thousands of square acres to get cobalt. Now, think about driving electric cars. They run on these batteries. Where are they going to get all that lithium? Well, if I remember right from reading, places in South America, I think it's Brazil. You don't necessarily always need to know exactly where these things come from, but this is the reality. You can look it up. Lithium mines are horrible. I mean, and plus, you got to remember, when these companies go in, they're taking indigenous land. They're taking, here in the United States, certain aspects of the government are trying to go in and drill and get in resources, oil, etc., on federal lands and national parks. We cannot allow this. You cannot keep ripping up the earth. When you're talking about, say, a forest, an old growth forest especially, when you make a log road through that floor of that forest, that cuts into the middle of that forest carpet on the bottom. That is called biome. That is completely interconnected and like a living organism underneath that forest floor, or on that forest floor. That has a function, and when you cut into it, it separates this side from that side, and it starts to deteriorate from the edges in. And then you cut more, and then you cut down trees, and you run over parts of it, and it just wreaks destruction and death for that forest. And we keep doing this and doing this. Just look up how much forest we lose every year, every day. There's football fields, they measure it in football fields so that people can get an idea. Football fields, I forget now the statistics, but when you start looking it up, You won't believe it. You just won't believe what we do on a daily basis so that we can have these cushy lives. Even me on this computer. You know, if it wasn't for trying to get these ideas across, I wouldn't have a computer. I mean, I love being able to do my charts on the computer, but I keep thinking to myself, you know, at some point I'm going to be giving this up. I don't know when, but down the road, if people aren't getting the message in the first place, if they're fighting back and they're resistant to such a great extent that nothing is changing, which it probably won't, why would I keep banging my head against the brick wall? I mean, I could always do charts from a book, calculate them by hand, you know, but I mean, I have my desktop upstairs with my astrology program in it. I've had it since, I believe, 2008. Yeah. That particular computer is not hooked up to the internet anymore. I just have my program in there. And I do some writing in it. But, and this laptop, you know, but like, overall, I try to keep my footprint small. I have a huge garden, 2 gardens. We produced a lot of our own food this year. Green beans, purple pole beans. We have like over 30 tomato plants. Mostly I get heirlooms. My husband heirloom plants. My husband got regular tomato plants. That's all he bought. I bought all the other stuff. But I get heirlooms so that I can collect my own seeds. I've just begun doing that. I'm trying to practice. It doesn't mean I'm really good at it yet, but I'm working at that, the seed collecting, so that I can replant with those seeds. This is things that people are going to have to think about. Are we really going to be able to help ourselves survive this way in the long run when it's hard to get food from a grocery store or it's too expensive? For a while, you can manage. Yes, for a while. But down the road, as things devolve, it'll get harder and harder. Last but not least, nuclear power plants. I would love for all listening to learn about the negatives, and there's plenty. Negatives of nuclear power, because they're going to try to shove this down our throats, like they've already done. But they're trying to say now that they have thorium plants, but there's no thorium plants at work. That you'll read about that, oh, how great thorium plants are. No, there are none right now because they're not better. Look that up. There are many negatives, and when you hear about how great the wildlife's doing around Chernobyl and such, they're not. I mean, their DNA is changed. Humans, would you really want to live there? I mean, really. And really, actually, one of the main things you got to keep in mind is they made a massive concrete shell around that, and that started to deteriorate over the last few years, and they had to make another one. So listen to this. In the future, when things get really difficult, are they going to be able to build concrete structures around these melted down nuclear power plants? No! That's one of the only reasons why those wildlife can still be there. If there was no cement structures around to contain all that radiation, there'd be nothing there. Nothing. Because it'd be radiated to death. So keep that in mind as the 450 or more nuclear power plants slowly begin to shut down and melt down, have leaks and all other kinds of issues. Nobody's going to be able to fix them. There's not going to be the materials. There's not going to be the peace in any particular country in order to be able to do that. The government might not be able to get its act together to do it. There won't be them. Right now, look this up. We're having shortages of sand. They use sand to make concrete. Look it up. You don't think that's a reality. There's aspects of all of these industrial processes and industrial aspects of our lives that you don't get, because if you're not in the scientific field, you're not going to know what the processes are involved. So you're going to think, oh yeah, right, we're out of sand, right? No, there's aspects of that you don't get. You can't just go rip off sand from a beach, you know? You can't do that. And in the deserts, There's particular kinds of sand that you need for certain things, so look all that up. This is a lot of homework, I know. I've been doing this now for 16 years. I've been studying astrology since 1977. I hope I made a dent in getting you to grasp the realities that we're facing. I wanted to get more uh, information from articles in this, but I didn't. Maybe tomorrow. I need to pull them up on my phone to read them and such, but hopefully this made sense. Anybody wants to ask questions, be my guest. I might put up a couple of videos. Usually, some of the videos, look, there's a really good one I saw recently, and they talked, one of the main things they really get across well is how bad off the oceans are. Get this. They find plastic fibers in seafood now. Yes. And when you're eating seafood, you're eating plastic fibers. And there was another study that was done a couple of years ago in Europe where they found plastic fibers and molecules in people's stool. Yes. So, with that, I should let you go. But, the moon's on Scorpio, so I had to bring up all this stuff, right? We're not off the hook no matter what we do. Just keep that in mind. All we can do now, if you really are interested, there's a website, a Facebook page called, oh boy, hold it, I'll get there. It's really good. The gentleman who started it, his name is Jem Bendel, Jem Bendel. He wrote a paper. He worked with NGOs for decades. He was a go-between between environmentalists and business. And at one point he realized business always wins. They always get their way. And nothing's changing. So if you look up, Deep Adaptation, that's what it's called. I know I get there. Deep Adaptation Facebook page. So look for that because you'll get a lot of information on there and a lot of good videos and articles and people to talk to. Okay? I don't know that you can, well, I have brought up, I think, my astrology on there a little bit because people are a bit open-minded, trust me. But it's not something you can go on about. It's scientific. So with that, I really am going to go this time. Take care. Bye.